Believe it or not, even though we're watching SpaceX fly the most powerful rocket ever built from Texas, that's not where Starship will mainly launch from in the long run. That future is actually in Florida. SpaceX is building out a new spaceport there to handle full-scale Starship operations. And this isn't just about long-term expansion. Today, we're diving into SpaceX's master plan for Starship in Florida, how they plan to move these massive vehicles, and the real reason they're ramping up construction right now, even though Starship isn't fully operational yet. Eventually, SpaceX will probably build a full-on rocket factory on Florida's Space Coast. But in the meantime, if Starships are actually going to start launching from Kennedy Space Center in the next couple of years, they've got a bit of a logistics puzzle to solve, because those vehicles are still being built down in South Texas. Right now, the main way SpaceX moves Starship, the upper stage, and the Super Heavy booster from Starbase in Boca Chica to Florida is by sea, using specialized transport barges. It's not a permanent solution, more like a bridge until Florida production ramps up, but it gets the job done. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. For starters, these things are massive, like seriously massive. Super Heavy alone stands around 70+ meters tall, and the full stack pushes past 120 meters. Moving something that big over land for 1,000+ miles just isn't realistic. There are too many obstacles, like roads, bridges, and regulations that simply aren't designed for something of that scale. Shipping by sea, on the other hand, avoids most of those problems. It lets SpaceX move these huge vehicles more efficiently through the Gulf and into Florida's waterways without having to tear up infrastructure along the way. Plus, this isn't new territory for them. SpaceX already has a ton of experience with barge operations, from Falcon landing drone ships to transporting large components between sites. They've even shipped Starship hardware between Texas and Florida before, just in the opposite direction. To move something as big as Starship safely, SpaceX transports the vehicles horizontally, basically laid on their side. Standing them upright at sea would be incredibly risky, since you're dealing with wind, waves, and a very tall structure with a high center of mass. One rough patch of ocean and things could go sideways, literally. The main ship handling this job right now is a barge called You'll Thank Me Later, a name Elon Musk teased back in September 2025. It's a fun nod to the Culture series by Ian M. Banks, which Musk often references. The vessel itself is a modified Marmac 31 barge, measuring about 79 meters long and 22 meters wide. That gives it a huge, stable deck area, perfect for carrying massive rocket sections. SpaceX has already run successful test trips with this barge, and it's now actively being used to move large Starship components, like tank sections, from Texas over to Florida, specifically around Kennedy Space Center's turn basin and the Port Canaveral area. There's also a second barge joining the effort. Just read the instructions. If that name sounds familiar, it's because it used to be one of SpaceX's Falcon 9 drone ships, an autonomous spaceport drone ship that handled ocean landings. Over its career, it supported 156 successful Falcon 9 booster landings, which is pretty wild when you think about it. That role is now officially over. After its final landing on April 21, 2026, during the GPS-3-8 mission, SpaceX announced the vessel would be retired from Falcon operations and repurposed. Now, it's getting a second life. Just Read the Instructions will team up with You'll Thank Me Later to help transport full Starship upper stages and Super Heavy boosters from Starbase in Texas to Florida's Space Coast, basically becoming part of the backbone for Starship's early logistics network. SpaceX is aiming to bring the Super Heavy booster back to the launch site instead of landing it downrange on a drone ship. The idea is to catch it mid-air using a tower equipped with large, moving arms that grab the rocket as it hovers just above the ground. Pretty wild, but very on-brand for SpaceX. At LC-39A, Kennedy Space Center, the company is wrapping up a Starship launch and catch site. The tower is already stacked, and work is ongoing on a new flame trench and deflector system inspired by designs from Starbase, along with the launch mount, tank farm, and other supporting infrastructure. There's been solid progress so far, especially on the concrete work and structural upgrades. This will likely be the main hub for Starship's first launches out of Florida. Over at SLC-37, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, construction is now underway after getting the green light. This site is meant to expand capacity with additional pads and towers to support a higher launch rate. Crews are already working on foundations and tower sections, some of which are being built at Roberts Road and shipped over. You can see early signs of site prep, staging, and initial structures taking shape. The long-term plan includes multiple towers, though the first operations probably won't happen until late 2026 at the earliest. As we know, SpaceX's way of building Starship is all about learning by doing. They follow what's basically a spiral development process. Build it, launch it, see what breaks, fix it, and repeat. Instead of waiting for a perfect design, they test full-scale rockets early and often, then roll those lessons straight into the next version. For that approach to work, though, you need a lot of hardware ready to go. That's why SpaceX has been rapidly expanding its huge network of assembly buildings. One of the key facilities is Star Factory, a massive 1 million square foot site designed to churn out components for multiple Starships every week. Even that isn't enough to keep up with their pace. So now they're building an even bigger facility called Gigabay right next to Star Factory to push production even further. And it's not just happening in Texas. They're setting up a similar operation in Florida, too. At the Roberts Road site within Kennedy Space Center, this new Gigabay facility is enormous. It'll stand about 380 feet, 116 meters tall, with roughly 46.5 million cubic feet of interior space and around 815,000 square feet of usable workspace spread across multiple levels. It's designed to handle vehicles up to about 81 meters, 266 feet tall. Inside, it'll have 24 work cells for vehicle integration and refurbishment, along with heavy-lift cranes capable of handling up to 400 tons. That makes it significantly larger and more capable than the current megabays in Starbase, Texas. Over 11 times the workspace, 19 more work cells, and more than double the crane capacity. Construction is already well underway as of early to mid-2026, with the steel structure going up and exterior cladding starting to take shape. Progress has been moving quickly, and the facility is expected to be completed and operational by late 2026, with some estimates pointing to around August. They're also building out a lot of supporting infrastructure to make the whole operation more self-sufficient. That includes things like on-site air separation units and methane liquefaction plants, so they can produce their own propellants instead of relying on shared resources that might affect other operators. On top of that, there are upgrades to roads like Roberts Road, along with improvements to power and wastewater systems, and even the possibility of dedicated landing zones. A big priority for SpaceX is making sure all of this runs smoothly without getting in the way of other activity on the Space Coast. They've been clear that Starship operations and safety zones are designed so they don't interfere with Falcon launches or other providers in the area. So yeah, we know SpaceX is building a massive Starship launch facility in Florida, but that still leaves the big question. Why ramp things up now when Starship isn't even fully operational yet? The short answer is, it's not as far off as it seems. SpaceX is going to need that facility sooner than most people think. NASA has already awarded SpaceX contracts worth over $4 billion to develop a human-rated version of Starship for the first 2 Artemis moon landings later this decade. To make that happen, SpaceX has to set up a fuel depot in low Earth orbit and refill it before sending the lunar lander to the moon. And that's where things get intense. Filling that depot could take around 10 to 15 Starship tanker launches. Doing that within a month or two means a lot of launches in a short time, more than a single launch pad can realistically handle. So the plan is to alternate between at least 2 pads, likely one in Texas and one in Florida. Now, imagine everything else is ready. Orbital refueling works, an uncrewed moon landing has been successful, and NASA's Artemis program hardware like SLS and Orion are good to go. But then Florida runs into delays. What happens? In that case, it's actually possible SpaceX could run all those tanker and depot missions out of Texas using multiple pads. In fact, they're already rebuilding the older Pad 1 to support the latest version of Starship. Still, that's more of a backup plan. The main goal is to have the Florida site, specifically LC-39A at Kennedy Space Center, fully up and running. There are a few ways this could play out, and SpaceX is known for moving fast when it comes to building infrastructure. But for lunar missions, NASA clearly prefers a setup where launches can alternate between Texas and Florida. It's just more efficient, and gives them a lot more flexibility when the clock is ticking. Now that Starship is close to actually flying, SpaceX has a much clearer idea of how it wants to operate the system in Florida. SpaceX is planning for up to 44 Starship/Super Heavy launches per year from LC-39A alone. On top of that, you're looking at up to 44 Super Heavy booster landings and 44 Starship landings, whether that's back at the pad, on drone ships in the Atlantic, or even expendable ocean landings. And that's just one site. With SLC-37 and future expansion, total Starship activity along the Space Coast could go well beyond that. Long-term, SpaceX is aiming for something even more ambitious, launching Starship more frequently than it currently flies the Falcon 9. There's a good reason to push operations to the East Coast, too. Launching from Florida opens up more favorable trajectories for certain missions, and SpaceX is also planning to build propellant production facilities nearby to support rapid turnaround. SpaceX has described the goal as turning the Space Coast into a full-on starport, with something closer to airport-style operations, multiple launches a day from multiple providers, flying whenever vehicles are ready, supporting all kinds of missions. At the same time, Falcon operations won't just disappear. Launches will continue at LC-39A in parallel, although some changes, like removing the crew access arm, are being made to prioritize Starship. SpaceX is putting at least $1.8 billion into Starship infrastructure in Florida, which is expected to create around 600 full-time jobs by 2030. It also builds on the company's already major presence in the region and helps position Florida as a key hub for next-generation spaceflight. Meanwhile, Starbase will continue to be the main hub for development and testing. Elon Musk has described Texas as more of a development and testing center, while Florida becomes the primary operational launch base. So, in simple terms, Starbase is still the heart of Starship, but Florida is where it really scales. And that matters, because Cape Canaveral Spaceport is already one of the busiest and most important launch sites in the world. Bringing Starship there doesn't just add another rocket, it could unlock a whole new level of capability for a place that's already leading the industry.